Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the Western Canon Challenge, where we are reading the entirety of the Western literary canon out loud. Today we continue in The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. We recently began Book 3, and we are up to Chapter 4 in that book, this titled, They Ride the Wood Under the Mountains. And with that, I'll get started. When Ralph woke on the morrow, it was broad day, as far as the trees would have it so. He rose at once and looked about for his fellow, but saw her not. And for some moments of time he thought he had dreamed her, but he saw that the fire had been quickened from its embers, and closed by the hauberk and strange-fashioned helm, and the sword of the damsel, and presently he saw her coming through the trees barefoot, with the green-sleeved silken surcoat hanging below the knees, and her hair floating loose about her. She stepped lightly up to Ralph with a cheerful, smiling countenance and a ruddy color in her cheeks, but her eyes moist as if she could scarce keep back the tears for joy of the morning's meeting. He thought her fairer than erst, and made as if he would put his arms about her, but she held a little aloof from him, blushing yet more. Then she said in her sweet, clear voice, "Hail, fellow farer, now begins the day's work. I have been down yonder, and found a bright woodland pool to wash the night off me. And if thou wilt do in likewise, and come back to me, I will dight our breakfast meantime, and we will speedily to the road." He did as she bade him, thinking of her all the while, till he came back to her fresh and gay. Then he looked to their horses, and gave them fodder gathered from the poolside, and so turned to Ursula, and found her with the meat ready dight. So they ate and were glad. When they had broken their fast, Ralph went up to saddle horses, and coming back found Ursula binding up her long hair. She smiled on him and said, "Now we are for the road. I must be an armed knight again. Forsooth, I unbound my hair and now, and let my surcoat hang loose about me in token that thou wottest my secret. Soothly, my friend, it irks me that now we have met after a long while, I must needs be clad thus graceless. But need me drave to it, and withal the occasion that was given to me to steal this gay armour from a lad at Utterbol, the nephew of the lord, who like his Emma was half my lover, half my tyrant. Of all which I will tell thee hereafter, and what wise I must needs steer betwixt stripes and kisses these last days. But now let us arm and to horse. Yet first, lo you, here are some tools that in thine hands shall keep us from sheer famine. As for me, I am no archer, and forsooth no man at arms, save in seeming." Therewith she showed him a short Turk bow and a quiver of arrows, which he took well pleased. So then they armed each other, and as she handled Ralph's war gear, she said, "How well wrought and trusty is this hauberk of thine, my friend. My coat is but a toy to it, with its gold and silver rings and its gemmed collar, and thy plates be thick and wide and well wrought, whereas mine are little more than adornments to my arms and legs." He looked on her lovingly, and loved her shapely hands amidst the dark grey mail, and said, "That is well, dear friend, for since my breast is a shield for thee, it behoves it to be well covered." She looked at him, and her lips trembled, and she put out her hand as if to touch his cheek, but drew it back again, and said, "Come now, let us to horse, dear fellow in arms." So they mounted and went their ways through a close pine wood, where the ground was covered with pine tree needles, and all was still and windless. So as they rode, said Ursula, "I see tokens of the way to the Sage of Swevenham. Hast thou seen a water yesterday?" "Yea," said Ralph, "I rode far along it, but left it, because I deemed that it turned north overmuch." "Thou wert right," she said. "Besides that, my turning from it hath brought us together, for it would have brought thee to Utterbol at last. But now have we to hit upon another that runneth straight down from the hills. Not the great mountains, but the high ground whereon the sage is dwelling. I know not whether the ride be long or short, but the stream is to lead us." On they rode through the wood, wherein was little change for hours. And as they rested, Ursula gave forth a deep breath, as one who has cast off a load of care. And Ralph said, "Why sighest thou, fellow farer?" "Oh," she said, "it is for pleasure, and a thought that I had. For a while ago I was a thrall, living amongst fears that sickened the heart, and then a little while I was a lonely wanderer. And now, therefore was I thinking that ever if I come back to mine own land and my home, the scent of a pine wood shall make me happy. Ralph looked on her eagerly, but said naught for a while. But at last he spoke. "Tell me, my friend," said he, "if we be met by strong thieves on the way, what shall we do then?" "It is not like to befall," she said, "for men fear the wood, therefore is there little prey for thieves therein. But if we chance on them, the token of Utterbol on mine armour shall make them meek enough." Then she fell silent a while and spoke again. "True it is that we may be followed by the Utterbol riders, for though they also fear the wood, they fear it not so much as they fear their lord. Howbeit we be well ahead, and it is little like that we shall be overtaken before we have met the sage, and then belike he shall provide." "Yea," said Ralph, "but what if the chase comes up with us? Shall we suffer us to be taken alive?" She looked on him solemnly, laid her hand on the beads about her neck, and answered, "By this token we must live as long as we may, whatsoever may befall, for at the worst may some road of escape be open to us. Yet, oh, how far easier it were to die than be led back to Utterbol." A while they rode in silence, both of them, but at last spake Ralph, but slowly and in a dull, stern voice. "Maybe it were good that thou told me somewhat of the horrors and evil days of Utterbol." "Maybe," she said, "but I will not tell thee of them. Forsooth, there are some things which a man may not easily tell a man, be he never so much a friend as thou art to me. But bethink thee," and she smiled somewhat, "that this gear belieth me, and that I am but a woman. And some things there be which a woman may not tell to a man, nay, not even when he hath held her long in his arms." And therewith she flushed exceedingly. But he said in a kind voice, "I am sorry that I asked thee, and I will ask thee no more thereof." She smiled on him friendly, and they spake of other matters as they rode on. But after a while Ralph said, "If it were no misease to thee to tell me how thou didst fall into the hands of the men of Utterbol, I were fain to hear the tale." She laughed outright and said, "Why wilt thou be forever harping on the time of my captivity, friend? And thou knowest the story somewhat already. Howbeit I may tell thee thereof without heart-burning, though it be a felon tale." He said, somewhat shamefacedly, "Take it not ill that I am fain to hear of thee and thy life days, since we are become fellow-farers." "Well," she said, "this befell outside Utterbol, so I will tell thee. After I stood in the thrall market at Cheaping Knowe, and not been sold, the wild man led me away toward the mountains that are above Goldburg. And as we drew near to them on a day, he said to me that he was glad to the heart root that none had cheapened me at the said market. And when I asked him wherefore, he fell a-weeping as he rode beside me, and said, Yet would God that I had never taken thee. I asked what ailed him, though indeed I deemed that I knew. He said, This aileth me, that though thou art not of the blood wherein I am bound to wed, I love thee sorely, and would have thee to wife, and now I deem that thou wilt not love me again. I said that he guessed aright, but that if he would do friendly with me, I would be no less than a friend to him. That availeth little, quoth he. I would have thee be mine of thine own will. I said that I might not be, that I could not love but one man alone. Is he alive? Said he. Good sooth, I hope so, said I. But if he be dead, then is desire of men dead within me. So we spake, and he was downcast and heavy of mood, but thenceforward he was no worse to me than a brother, and he proffered it to lead me back if I would, and put me safely on the way to Whitwall. But as thou wottest, I had need to go forward, and no need to go back. Thus we entered into the mountains of Goldburg. But one morning when he arose, he was heavier of mood than his wont, and was restless withal, and could be steadfast neither in staying nor going, nor naught else. So I asked what ailed him, and he said, My end draweth nigh. I have seen my fetch, and am fey. My grave abideth me in these mountains. Thou hast been dreaming ugly dreams, said I. Such things are of no import. And I spoke lightly and strove to comfort him. He changed not his mood for all that, but he said, This is ill for thee also, for thou wilt be worser without me than with me in these lands. Even so I deemed, and withal I was sorry for him, for though he were uncouth and ungainly, he was no ill man. So against my will I tumbled into the same like mood as his, and we both fared along drearily. But above sunset, as we came round a corner of the cliffs of those mountains, or ever we were aware of happened upon a half-score of weaponed men, who were dighting a camp under a big rock thereby. But 4 there were with them, and were still a horseback, so that when Bull Nosy, for that was his name, strove to flee away with me, it was of no avail. For the said horseman took us, and brought us before an evil-looking man, who, to speak shortly, was he whom thou hast seen, to wit, the Lord of Utterbol. He took no heed of Bull Nosy, but looked on me closely, and handled me as a man doth with a horse at a cheaping, so that I went nigh to smiting him, whereas I had a knife in my bosom, but the chaplet refrained me. To make a short tale of it, he bade Bull sell me to him, which Bull utterly naysayed, standing stiff and stark before the Lord, and scowling on him. But the Lord laughed in his face, and said, So be it, for I will take her without a price, and thank thee for sparing my gold. Then said Bull, If thou take her as a thrall, thou wert best to take me also, else shall I follow thee as a free man, and slay thee when I may. Many are the days of the year, and on some one of them will betide the occasion for the knife. Thereat the Lord waxed very pale, and spake not, but looked at that man of his who stood by Bull with a great sword in his fist. And the Lord lifted up his hand twice, and let it fall twice, whereat that man stepped back one space, and swung his sword, and smote Bull, and clave his skull. Then the colour came into the Lord's face again, and he said, Now, vassals, let us dine and be merry, for at least we have found something in the mountains. So they fell and ate and drank, and victual was given to me also, but I had no will to eat, for my soul was sick, and my heart was heavy, foreboding the uttermost evil. Withal I was sorry for Bull Nosy, for he was no ill man, and had become my friend. So they abode there that night, leaving Bull lying like a dog unburied in the wilderness. And on the morrow they took the road to Utterbol, and went swiftly, having no baggage, and staying but for victual, and for rest every night. The Lord had me brought to him on that first evening of our journey, and he saw me privily, and spake to me, bidding me do shameful things, and I would not. Wherefore he threatened me grievously, and I, being alone with him, bade him beware lest I should slay him for myself. Thereat he turned pale, as he had done before Bull Nosy, yet sent for none to slay me, but only bade me back to my keepers. And so I came to Utterbol unscathed. And at Utterbol, said Ralph, What befell thee there? Ursula smiled on him, and held up her finger, yet she answered, Utterbol is a very great house and a fair land, and there are sundry roofs and many fair chambers. There was I brought to a goodly chamber amidst a garden, and women servants were given me, who led me to the bath, and clad me in dainty raiment, and gave me to eat and to drink, and all that I needed. That is all my tale for this time. Chapter 5. They come on the Sage of Swevenham. Night was at hand before they came to the stream that they sought. They found it cleaving the pine-wood, which held on to the very bank of it, and was thick again on the further side in a few yards' space. The stream was high-banked, and ran deep and strong. Said Ursula, as they came up to it, We may not cross it, but it matters not, and it is tomorrow that we must ride up along it. So they abode there, and made a fire by the water-side, and watched there, turn and turn about, till it was broad day. Naught befell to tell of, save that twice in the night Ralph deemed that he heard a lion roar. They got to horse speedily when they were both awake, and rode up the stream. They began to go uphill, and by noon were come into a rough and shaggy upland, whence from time to time they could see the huge wall of the mountains, which yet seemed to Ralph scarce nigher, if at all, than when he had beheld it ere he had come to Vale Turris. The way was rough day long, and now and again they found it hard to keep the stream in sight, as especially when it cleft a hill and ran between sheer cliffs, with no shore on either side. They made way but slowly, so that at last Ralph lost patience somewhat, and said that he had but little hope of falling in with the sage that day or any day. But Ursula was of good cheer, and mocked him merrily but sweetly, till his heart was lightened again. Withal she bade him seek some venison, since they were drawing out the time, and she knew not how long it would be ere they came to the sage's dwelling. Therefore he betook him to the Turkbow, and shot a leash of heath-fowl, and they supped on the meat merrily in the wilderness. But if they were merry, they were soon also weary, for they journeyed on after sunset that night, since the moon was up, and there was no thick wood to turn dusk into dark for them. Their resting place was a smooth piece of greensward betwixt the water and a half-circle of steep bent that well-nigh locked it about. There then they abode, and in the stillness of the night heard a thundering sound coming down the wind to them, which they deemed was the roaring of distant waters. And when they went to the lip of the river, they saw flocks of foam floating by, wherefore they thought themselves to be near some great mountain neck, wherever the water was falling from some high place. But with no to-do, they lay down upon the greensward the second night of their fellowship, and waked later than on the day before. For so weary had they been that they kept but ill watch in the dark night, and none at all after dawn began to glimmer. Now Ralph sat up and saw Ursula still sleeping. Then he arose to his feet and looked about him, and saw there 2 horses cropping the grass under the bent, and beside them a man, tall and white-bearded, leaning on his staff. Ralph caught up his sword and went toward the man, and the sun gleamed from the blade just as the hoary one turned to him. He lifted up his staff as if in greeting to Ralph, and came toward him, and even therewith Ursula awoke and arose, and saw the grey-beard at once, and she cried out, "Take heed to thy sword, fellow-farer, for praised be the saints, this is the sage of Swevenham." So they stood there together till the sage came up to them, and kissed them both, and said, "I am glad that ye are come at last, for I looked for you no later than this. So now mount your horses, and come with me straightway, because life is short to them who have not yet drunk of the well at the world's end. Moreover, if ye chance to come on the riders of Utterbol, it shall go hard with you unless I be at hand." Ralph saw of him that though he was an old hoar man to look on, yet he was strong and sturdy, tall and of goodly presence, with ruddy cheeks and red lips and bright eyes, and that the skin of his face and hands was nowise wrinkled, but about his neck was a pair of beads, like unto his own gossip's gift. So now they mounted at once, and with no more words he led them about the bent. And they came in a little while into the wood again, but this time it was of beech, and here and there an open place sprinkled about with hollies and thorns, and they rode down the wide slope of a long hill, and up again on the other side. Thus they went for an hour, and the elder spake not again, though it might have been deemed by his eyes that he was eager and fain. They also held their peace, for the hope and fear of their hearts kept them from words. They came to the hilltop and found a plain land, though the close wood still held on a while. But soon they rode into a clearing of some 12 acres, where there fenced crofts, with goats therein, 3 garths of tillage, wherein the wheat shocks were yet standing, and there were coleworts and other pot herbs also. But at the further end, whereas the wood closed in again, was a little house builded of timber, strong and goodly, and thatched with wheat straw. And beside it was a bubbling spring, which ran in a brook athwart the said clearing. Over the house door was a carven rood, and a bow and short spear were leaned against the wall of the porch. Ralph looked at all closely, and wondered whether this were perchance that cot wherein the Lady of Abundance had dwelt with the evil witch. But the elder looked on him and said, "I know thy thought, and it is not so. That house is far away hence, yet shalt thou come thereto. Now, children, welcome to the house of him who hath found what ye seek, but hath put aside the gifts which ye shall gain, and who belike shall remember what ye shall forget." Therewith he brought them into the house and into a chamber, the plenishing whereof was both scanty and rude. There he bade them sit, and brought them victual, to wit, cheese and goat's milk and bread. And they fell to speech concerning the woodland ways and the seasons and other unweighty matters. But as for the old man, he spoke but few words, and as one unused to speech, albeit he was courteous and debonair. But when they had eaten and drunk, he spake to them and said, Ye have sought to me because you would find the well at the world's end, and I would have lore of me concerning the road thereto. But before I tell you what you would, let me know what ye know thereof already. Quoth Ralph, For me, little enough, I know, save that I must come to the rock of the fighting man, and that thou knowest the way thither. And thou, damsel, quoth the long hoary, what knowest thou? Must I tell thee of the way through the mountains, and the wall of the world, and the winter valley, and the folk innocent, and the cot on the way, and the forest of strange things, and the dry tree? Nay, she said, of all this I wot somewhat, but it may not be enough. Said the sage, Even so it was with me, when a many years ago I dwelt nigh to Swevenham, and folk sought to me for lore, and I told them what I knew. But maybe it was not enough, for they never came back, but died belike, or ever they had seen the well. And then I myself, when I was gotten very old, fared thither a-seeking it, and I found it. For I was one of those who bore the chaplet of the seekers, and now I know all, and can teach all. But tell me, damsel, whence thou hadst this lore. Said Ursula, I had it of a very fair woman, who, as it seemeth, was lady and queen of the champions of Hampton under the Scar, not far from my own land. Yea, quoth the sage, and what hath befallen her? Nay, nay, said he, I need not ask, for I can see by your faces that she is dead. Therefore hath she been slain, or otherwise she had not been dead. So I ask you if you were her friends. Quoth Ursula, Surely she was my friend, since she befriended me, and this man I deem was altogether her friend. Ralph hung his head, and the sage gazed on him, but said naught. Then he took a hand of each of them in his hands, and held them a while silently, and Ralph was still downcast and sad, but Ursula looked on him fondly. Then spake the sage, So it is, knight, that now I seem to understand what manner of man thou art, and I know what has been between you two, whereof I will say naught, but will let thee the tree grow according to its seed. Moreover, I wot now that my friend of past years would have me make you both wise in the lore of the well at the world's end, and when I have done this, I can do no more. But let your good hap prevail, if so it may. Abide a little, therefore. Then he went unto an ark, and took thence a book wrapped in a piece of precious web of silk and gold, and bound in cur-boily, wrought in strange devices. Then said he, This book was mine heritage at Swevenham, or ever I became wise, and it came from my father's grandsire. And my father bade me look on it as the dearest of all possessions. But I heeded it not, till my youth had waned, and my manhood was full of weariness and grief. Then I turned to it, and read in it, and became wise, and the folk sought to me, and afterwards that befell which was foredoomed. Now herein, amongst other matters, is written of that which ye desire to know, and I will read the same to you and expound it. Yet were it not well to read in this book under a roof, nay, though it be as humble and innocent as this. Moreover, it is not meet that ye should hearken to this wisdom of old times, clad as you are. Thou, knight, in thy raiment of the manslayer, with a rod of wrath hanging at thy side, and thou, maiden, attired in the garments of the tyrant, which were won of him by lying and of guile. Then he went to another ark, and took from it 2 bundles, which he gave the one to Ralph, the other to Ursula, and said, Thou, maiden, go thou into the inner chamber here, and doff thy worldly raiment, and don that which thou wilt find wrapped in this cloth. And thou, knight, take this other, and get thee into the thicket which is behind the house, and there do the like, and abide there till we come to thee. So Ralph took the bundle, and came out into the thicket, and unarmed him, and did on the raiment which he found in the cloth, which was but a long gown of white linen, much like an alb, broidered about the wrists and the hem and collars, with apparels of gold and silk, girt with red silk girdle. There he abode a little, wondering at all these things, and all that had befallen him since he had left Upmeads. Anon the two others came to him, and Ursula was clad in the same like raiment, and the elder had the book in his hand. He smiled on Ralph and nodded friendly to him. As to Ursula, she flushed as red as a rose when she set eyes on him, for she said to herself that he was as one of the angels which she had seen painted in the choir of St. Mary's at Higham. Chapter 6. Those two are learned lore by the sage of Swevenham. Now the sage led them through the wood till they came to a grassy lawn, amidst of which was a table of stone, which it seemed to Ralph must be like to that whereon the witch-wife had offered up the goat to her devils, as the Lady of Abundance had told him. And he changed countenance as the thought came into his mind. But the sage looked on him and shook his head and spake softly, In these wastes and wilds are many such like places, where of old time the ancient folks did worship to the gods of the earth, as they imagined them. And whereas the lore in this book cometh of such folk, this is no ill place for the reading thereof. But if ye fear the book and its writers, who are dead long ago, there is yet time to go back and seek the well without my helping, and I say not but that ye may find it even thus. But if ye fear not, then sit ye down on the grass, and I will lay the book on this most ancient table, and read in it, and do ye hearken heedfully. So they sat down side by side, and Ralph would have taken Ursula's hand to caress it, but she drew it away from him. Howbeit she found it hard to keep her eyes from off him. The elder looked on them soberly, but nowise in anger, and presently began reading in the book. What he read shall be seen hereafter in the process of this tale, for the more part thereof had but to do with the way to the well at the world's end, all things concerning which were told out fully, both great and small. Long was this a reading, and when the sage had done, he bade now one and the other answer him questions as to what he had read, and if they answered amiss, he read that part again, and yet again, as children are taught in the school, until at last, when he asked any question, Ralph or the maiden answered it rightly at once. And by this time the sun was about to set, so he bade them home to his house, that they might eat and sleep there. But tomorrow, said he, I shall give you your last lesson from this book, and thereafter ye shall go your ways to the Rock of the Fighting Men, and I look not for it that ye shall come to any harm on the way. But whereas I deem today to have seen the foes of Utterbol seeking you, I will lead you forth a little. So they went home to the house, and he made them the most cheer that he might, and spake to them in friendly and pleasant mood, so that they were merry. When it was morning, they went again to the ancient altar, and again they learned lore from the elder, till they were waxen wise in matters of the well at the world's end. And long they sat and hearkened him till it was evening again, and once more they slept in the house of the sage at Swevenham. This is the end of chapters 4 through 6 of Book 3 of The Well at the World's End, a tale by William Morris. In the next video we will proceed to chapter 7, entitled An Adventure by the Way. Thank you for listening.